Today's date is June the 13th, 2020, Regina, Saskatchewan. What is your name and when and where were you born and where are you living now?
Okay, my name is Sharon Rabant. I was born here in Regina, actually, at the old Grey Nuns Hospital, and I am presently living on an acreage outside of Grenfell, Saskatchewan.
Do you remember what you thought when you first heard about the coronavirus?
Well, that would have been March 4th. I was actually on sick leave recovering from knee replacement surgery, and in my profession, I'm a health director. So my first thought when it hit Canada was I need to get back to work and I need to take care of my community.
And where do you work and what's your community?
I am the health services manager at the Saskatchewan.
When did your life start to change as a result? And in what ways did your everyday life change?
Oh, well, March 4th, I hobbled into my office on my walker, using my walker, and sat at my desk and immediately started to develop a pandemic plan for my community, and assemble the resources, both financial and people, to keep the community safe, prepare for isolation units in the event that we had confirmed cases in our community, and then set out a communication process so that all our community members would be informed about what was going on and how the virus was being transmitted, what the recommended precautions were that individuals were to take, make the necessary recommendations to the leadership as to what could be done in our community to keep our community members safe.
And how did your community respond to the virus?
Well, at that time, we had three what we'll call high needs clients that regularly had to attend to Regina for required medical treatment. So the first thing we did was evacuate them and then get information out to every household about the virus, about the precautions. We held community meetings. The community I work for is comprised of 3 different geographically distinct communities. So we went to each community and held public meetings with myself and my nursing staff and the chief of our community, and we explained to them about the virus, what they needed to know, who it was affecting, what the medical experts were saying, and what precautions had to be taken. And we also distributed copies of our pandemic plan and then answered any questions that people had.
How have you coped with the changes brought by the pandemic? Like culture, heritage, traditional knowledge, and traditional practices made a difference in your life during this time? If so, how?
Definitely. When the pandemic was called, or when I think it was March the 11th, that they actually declared the COVID-19 pandemic. Our cultural advisor at our health center immediately packed up his truck and took off to Manitoba to collect the traditional medicines that would be necessary to be able to keep the community safe, to treat the community. He was gone for about 2 days, came back, walked into my office, gave me a gallon of homemade cedar and chaga tea, explained to me how I was to consume it, and gave me instructions on the traditional medicines and how they were to be used. And I had to let the community members know that they would be available. We continued to have ceremonies in our community, even though they weren't being held in a lot of other communities. But we did it within the public health guidelines. And the traditional healing aspect of our community is really strong, so that it's something that's it's in our everyday lives. It's in our everyday health practices. And we're fortunate enough to have an elder who, the minute something happens, he steps forward He doesn't wait to be asked. He's part of our health team. He's part of our response.
Okay. What lessons for the future may come out of this experience for you, your family, your community, society as a whole?
Well, that no matter how dangerous the threat is, not everybody's going to listen. One of the things that really came to light, especially about a month into the pandemic, was the needs of, let's say, individuals who are living with addictions in our community. So that's sparked some change in terms of us trying to address their needs through implementing a harm reduction program. Also, the heart. I think the population that had the most difficulty coping were the elders who live alone. Fortunately, we continued to operate our Meals on Wheels program, which delivers hot lunches to them twice a week, so they would have that social check. And that was really important because a lot of time the older people really don't understand some of the new wave in medical language and why things are the way they are. And they just cope the way they've always coped. They'll drink their teas, they'll take their medicines, they'll do their smudges. But the coronavirus, when it first broke out, they said the elderly and children who had not been immunized were the greatest at risk. And then as we saw it approaching Canada, it was actually affecting all ages of the population. And the 45 to 60 were the ones that were actually passing away as a result of the virus. So it really makes you think and plan, and you have to look at all angles of response. And the motto I had with my staff in our clinic, because a lot of the First Nations health centers in the province were shut down. I didn't shut down my health center because I knew if I did, that would pull my nursing services out of the community. And when you're dealing with a pandemic, your nurses are your best resource, right? Mm-hmm. And so we did things a little bit differently. We continued to operate out of our health clinic. It was command central for the whole community, but the attitude and the moral of our operations is we have to treat everybody as though they're infected. So setting that and role modeling that behavior of the constant hand sanitizing, constant washing your hands. We were even taking extra changes of clothes to work, so if we had to be out in the community, we could completely change our clothes, shower right in the health center, and then be safe once again. The other thing that was as equally important is what we were doing outside of our office hours, because if you go out and engage in risky behavior outside of office hours, you're putting the whole health team at risk. So it was kind of like for almost 10 to 12 weeks, it was work and home, work and home, work and home. Family visits were done by telephone or they were done by FaceTime. And that was probably one of the hardest things to cope with, is not being in the community, but not being able to check on my family and my own children wanting to come home because they were scared. Yeah. And I had to say, no, you can't, you need to stay where you are and take these precautions. So.
What will you remember most about this time?
All of the unknowns and the dynamics of how something that developed in China can migrate to our country and dramatically change everybody's lives. Like when you see, although it started in BC, and I was like watching the numbers every day, watching the numbers. It was constant conference calls, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, lots of discussions with the Chief Medical Health Officer from Health Canada. And it's nothing stays the same, but I like to, I believe that no matter what you go through in life, there's a lesson to be learned, that the Creator puts those lessons in front of you, good or bad. No matter what the experience is, there's a lesson. If I had looked back now on how it's changed the way I think as a mother and as a grandmother, what it did, I think, is take a lot of our families back to the basics. You saw parents who were at home with their children because schools and daycares were closed. Mm-hmm. So whereas one time, prior to the pandemic, everybody was so busy and you're constantly on the go, on the go, on the go. Family time, family meals, home-cooked meals all disappeared. Mm-hmm. And then that brought them all back. So parents who were actually relearning how to parent and bond with their kids in a lot of cases. There's been a big shift in our community to food security and thinking about that. You can't find toilet paper and everybody goes crazy, right? Well, I've got a lot of young couples, young families now that they've put in gardens this year, for example. We've got a community chicken coop that, is being built, and we're bringing in meat chickens, so they'll be butchered in the fall. Just the whole idea of becoming self-sufficient and being able to provide for yourself. And I think that was the lesson in there, that the importance of that family unit and having a good, strong, clean home fire, mm-hmm. and taking care of that, and your responsibility as a parent, as a child, as a grandmother. Mm-hmm. That all seemed to resurface as a result of what we've lived through since March.
Yeah. Yep. And how are you staying in touch with family and friends?
Well, now that we're allowed to extend our bubble, as they call it, my closest girl I'm with all the time, and it's nice to be able to go out and visit. I still have to keep my numbers my circle really tight, because mm-hmm. this could flare up at any time and I could be back at my desk, right? Mm-hmm. So I still FaceTime, a lot of phone calls, Facebooking. My youngest granddaughter in North Battleford learned how to call me on Facebook, mm-hmm. So we're making use of the technology. That's the one good thing.
Yeah. Yep. Anything else would you like to add to this interview?
It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Okay, well, thank you for taking the time. And again, this is Louise, BigEagle, and I'm doing this interview for Heritage Saskatchewan.